You know, it's funny, the podcast is called Tech and Tea with Joshua Vergara, but I tend to be kind of loose and fast with the definition of tea. In this case, it's just whatever I'm drinking. And right now, if anybody out there hasn't tried this before, you should try drinking things like chicken broth a little bit more often. I know that this is some crazy new agey thing that people are doing, but honestly, if you're into chicken soup, why not drink it a little bit more? Okay, so a lot of you out there probably know that I was a big fan of BlackBerries, not only back in the day, but in the last couple of years as BlackBerry was attempting to come back into the smartphone game with a number of different releases that were always exciting, if not necessarily the best selling. I am going to go through a couple of the videos that I made back then. I remember when the BlackBerry Key 1 came out, I was just so happy that something like this was coming out, a smartphone version of like a BlackBerry Bold that had a very similar type of keyboard. A couple of things that I remember back then from the Key 1 was mainly that the keyboard was a little bit squishy, and also it was like glossy all over the place, so it did end up looking really dirty after a while, but it was still one of those phones that felt really awesome for the same reasons why the old BlackBerries felt awesome. It's because not a lot of people used them, especially in the dawn of the smartphone age when we had phones like the Nexus 1, the iPhone, the first version of the iPhone coming out. Once those started to come out, people who used BlackBerries felt like they were part of this really exclusive group. Say what you will about proprietary messaging services, they're definitely not the rage right now in current smartphone or digital messaging technology. But back then, the whole idea behind BBM was that you had other people who had BlackBerries and could access BBM. There were certain features in BBM that other messaging services just didn't have. And yeah, you felt like you were part of this little clique. So that level of exclusivity was always so nice. And I feel like BlackBerry did a really good job over the years of still capturing that audience, especially with the releases of their key line devices. It's not really a surprise, but at the same time, I am still a little bit bummed out about it because I still adore, I shouldn't say adored, I still adore the BlackBerry Key 2. Now, with the help of TCL, this was a sign of the times that BlackBerry was finding their own voice in the smartphone game. Not only were they providing some really good-looking and honestly useful hardware, they were finding a way of still being relevant in the Android ecosystem with an operating system that had a lot of useful features built in, and it wasn't missing too much. And you're seeing a lot of footage of my original Key 2 review right now. The reason why is because I think that's the best way for me to sort of illustrate just how much I was into the BlackBerry Key 2. And also, I want to highlight this video because it was one of the first videos that I did, one of the first full reviews I did on a smartphone shortly after I left Android Authority. So it was actually kind of a milestone phone in my own career, and that's another reason why it was so special to me. Say what you will about a phone that has less of a screen than other smartphones that are just all screen all the time, but it was really useful to have that keyboard on the bottom, not necessarily because of the typing experience, because that's a polarizing thing no matter what, but you could use all of those buttons in order to access a lot of functions of the phone without having to even turn on the phone or swipe through home screens or anything like that. No matter where you stand on the keyboard in general, you can't deny that whenever there's an extra form of input on a smartphone, we all tend to kind of praise it. Like, for example, the silence toggle on an iPhone or on a OnePlus, or back in the day with the Galaxy Active line, there was that extra button that you could map for other things. So imagine having the entire alphabet and more on the front of a phone, and every single one of those buttons could actually get you somewhere quicker than it would in any other conventional touchscreen sense. And I wasn't the only one that thought this way. I understand that the Key 2 was definitely an enthusiast phone. It wasn't necessarily something for the casual user, not most casual users anyway. But there's that old Instagram post or Twitter, I'm trying to remember exactly where it is, you're probably seeing it right now, where gentlemen like Sasha Pallenberg and Michael Fisher and myself were all sporting Key 2s, and we were all showing them to the camera because we were like the Key 2 group. And yeah, birds of a feather, like we were all fans of what BlackBerry was bringing to the market, and we were excited to see what would come next. But as the months went by and we didn't hear literally anything from BlackBerry, it became kind of obvious, the writing was on the wall, that maybe the partnership and the BlackBerry devices as we knew it would cease to exist. So clearly it was a journey from 2016 all the way until now, and BlackBerry and TCL have both said that current phones are going to still get support all the way through August 31st, 2022. Now, that doesn't really say much about software updates, if the Key 2 could still get software updates to further versions of Android. But even then, the Key 1 and the Key 2, it's not like they really got Android updates, major updates that is, that much to begin with. And, I find it funny that there are so many news pieces online right now that are just straight up saying BlackBerry is dead, hashtag BlackBerry is over, whatever the case may be. But this doesn't mean that BlackBerry as a phone brand is necessarily going to go by the wayside. It just means that BlackBerry as we know it, with their partnership with TCL, is no longer going to be a thing. A lot can happen between now and 2022, and that's plenty of time for BlackBerry to find another manufacturing partner, even though, to be fair, TCL is a pretty reliable manufacturer as long as they keep the partnerships up. TCL has helped a lot of different brands get themselves back off the ground and back into the public consciousness, and BlackBerry was a great example of that. But maybe BlackBerry would actually partner up with somebody else, or they would find a way of actually manufacturing devices again. But there is a point that I want to make about BlackBerry as a whole, especially over the last couple of years. Everybody out there is talking about this nostalgia trip that we have with smartphones at the moment. I am going to talk a little bit about the Galaxy S20, some of the hypes around that, but also the fact that something like the Galaxy Z Flip might actually be happening. Before that, we had the Moto Razr, which is starting to get into the hands of some users right now, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But if you look at the Z Flip and the Moto Razr, the nostalgia trip is real strong right now, and everybody is trying to create a smartphone from the form factors that we used to have. That sounds an awful lot like BlackBerry, doesn't it? If you look at everything in terms of just a nostalgia trip, I think we should be giving BlackBerry a little bit more credit in terms of bringing back an old form factor and finding a way of injecting the smartphone into it in a very practical fashion, and also in a very effective fashion. The BlackBerry Key 1 and Key 2 are obvious examples of what happens when you look to one's past in order to influence one's future. And that is what everyone's basically saying about phones like the Moto Razr and the Galaxy Z Flip. It's an experience in smartphones that we literally don't have anywhere else. And it would be great to see that become a thing more often. I mean, a Priv 2 probably would have been mind-blowing if they had like a great Key 2 keyboard underneath a full screen. That probably would have gone really well. That way people can still have their full screen experience, but then if you want a little bit of that nostalgia flip, you just gotta slide that screen up. In any case, for those of you on the YouTube side, thank you so much for watching this snippet from my podcast. Don't forget to get into the comment sections down below. Let me know what you think about BlackBerry basically losing their main manufacturer and potentially their place in the smartphone market. I'm not going to speculate and say that they are completely dead, but this is not a good sign, obviously, and we can only hope that BlackBerry can find a way to get themselves back up sometime in the future. But let me know what you think about all that in the comment sections down below. To listen to the entire podcast and any episode of the Tech and Tea podcast with Joshua Vergara, the link to the iTunes version of it is down in the description below. I'm still trying to get Spotify to notice my podcast again. I'm also looking to change hosts for my podcast, so hopefully the transition from YouTube to audio will be a little bit easier for those of you who are watching these videos on my channel. But in any case, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this video for the YouTube version. Thank you so much for watching. Drop some likes on this video, get into the comment sections, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until my next video, podcast or otherwise, I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, or in this case, broth, everybody.